we're happy that some of you are here. And we're going to close the door. If your friend's supposed to meet you here, but you didn't see him or her, that's okay. We send them to second floor, which is also broadcast. So it's a great pleasure to have Professor Qiang to give this talk. I don't have to explain why. I think every one of you know why. And I assume that everyone knows something about the Go game now. If you don't know 2 weeks ago, by now you should know how to play, I think, if you're here. Professor Qiang is a new bright professor of engineering here, and he's the department head of CSE. And I don't think I need to introduce him anymore, as probably most of you know him well. So let's welcome Professor Qiang.
Okay. So thank you for coming. This is exciting time for computer science and artificial intelligence. Now, so to begin with, I should tell you that I'm not a Go player. Actually, when I was small, I tried to learn, and I was so bad that I gave up. So that's why I changed to computer science. Okay, so we all know this event, and it's really a great event. So the first time we heard about this event was the publication of this Nature article. It's very rare for computer science articles to appear on Nature. So this immediately became a bombshell. Now, it says that all systems go. In fact, when you look into it, it's on January 26th. There's a bunch of people whose names I'm quite familiar with because they have taken the PhD degree from University of Alberta, which is considered one of the best schools in artificial intelligence, particularly in computer games. And then later on, they joined, so the first two, they joined DeepMind. Now, talking about DeepMind, I'm also very familiar because when I first set up the Huawei Noah's Ark Lab, I was fighting with them for some of the people in here. I'm very glad I lost. So these people went to DeepMind. So what did it say? Now, in fact, today I'm going to talk about three things. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on behind the Alphago algorithm. Hopefully in a very layman's term. So we get an understanding. Second, I'm going to relate that to the whole process of development of artificial intelligence. Okay, where we are going, where we came from, why we do it. And thirdly, I'm going to tell you a bit about why the development of artificial intelligence and AlphaGo is related to all of us. It actually has to do with all our future. And I don't want you to be scared. I just want you to be paying attention. So three things. And hopefully we'll have some time for QA. So this picture is very familiar. From last week, 5 times in a row, for 5 days, people are transfixed by this face and the term AlphaGo, right? So this, the game is very long, but I'm sure many people are glued. In AI itself, artificial intelligence is actually claimed to be roughly the third milestone. Okay, so we witnessed a major breakthrough in artificial intelligence. The first one was considered IBM Deep Blue when it beat the Kasparov, the world champion in chess. That was in 1997. So for some of you, maybe you are still in kindergarten. But for the second time, I'm sure most people witnessed the IBM Watson in the TV Jeopardy game, right? So the third time, the company changed to Google, and it happened this year. So if you look at the succession of dates, you can see a little bit of acceleration of technology. So what do we know about AlphaGo? In fact, a lot of this knowledge came from the Nature article, but in fact, in the artificial intelligence courses we teach here, many of the materials are taught here. I see many colleagues who are professors in that course. So very briefly, the game of Go is very simple. Its objective is to capture territories. There are 2 colors, and you hope to surround, that is, completely seal off the opening of a collection of stones, and thereby capturing that place. This is a on variable sized boards, and the standard one is 19 by 19, which has around 150 moves altogether, and on average, the branching factor is 250, and it's very, very many choices. So when we study this from computer science perspective, we consider a tree of expansion. And when we expand out the full tree, in fact, it's astonishing how many possible configurations there are. It's 10 to the 700, and it's considered much larger than the number of atoms in this universe. Okay, so that's how complex it is. Comparatively, chess is a relatively simple game, simple, quote unquote. It's not simple, but comparatively, it's a much smaller search space, although it's still complex. This is how you expand out a search tree. You place a stone one at a time, and you follow all possibilities. So the full tree, as I mentioned, is 250 wide, and it's a very, very big tree. So what is how do we formulate this problem as a mathematical problem? We can consider it similarly, very similarly to a maze, pathfinding in a maze, right? You are here and you wonder where to go. And what do? Suppose that you have a few sensors that you can send out. Let's say the DJI unmanned vehicle, which can fly out and report back. Some of these successfully found a way out. Many of them hit the wall and didn't come back. And then so you start counting how many of them came back, and you go for the one which had the most possibility, right? So this is the basic approach. To make this work on a computer is to find a path in which you reach a bottom, and at that terminal state, it's a win for you. And so to do that, you have to expand out this huge search tree. What do? You cut the tree, okay? So this is essentially all the methods, all the machine learning is trying to do is to cut as early as possible. And basically, you have 2 approaches in cutting this tree. One approach is you define a function that can give you a good evaluation of the winning chance if you go down a certain path. And that's known as a value network, a value function. So if I give you a board position, how good is it to you? Okay, so let's just consider between 0 and 100, and maybe one is 70 in score and another is 50 in score. You want to go with the one with the higher score. Another possibility is consider all the action candidates. That is it better to place your stone here versus there? And you want to assign, again, a score to that. Okay, so there are 2 strategies. One, the action allows you to evaluate all possible actions in order to cut some unpromising actions. And the other allows you to terminate early. But when you look at it, because this tree is very large, you want to this function to be efficiently evaluated as well as accurately evaluated. Okay, so therefore, we have to introduce the first technical concept today, which is known as deep learning. Okay, what deep learning does is, let's say as human, we look at this as a picture. Okay, we look at it from bird's eye view, and we want to make sense of it as a distribution of the stones. Computers don't do that, and this is the fault of many previous chess and Go computer programs. They consider a matrix not as a picture like a human sees, but rather as a very long vector which loses the topological information. But what deep learning allows you to do, this even more technical term is called convolutional neural network. It builds many layers of network. In each layer, it extracts out certain features, but essentially at the top layer, it gives you a bird's eye view, just like a human look at a board. Okay, are we better over here? Are we better over there? Should we play a battle here and ignoring over there? Okay, so on top, we have a probability distribution of the actions, and the higher the better. And so here's note number 1. For students who are taking the probability and statistics class, it's very important. Okay, the second one is a whole board, how good is it? Instead of looking at individual actions. Now this function, value function, it returns a single number which tells you how good it is. Now basically the two networks is a recent, development of deep learning is a recent event in machine learning and artificial intelligence, which can lift from mediocre accuracy to very high accuracy, to the point that it even surpasses, in some cases, human ability. Okay, so this is a major achievement. So this allows us to execute the branching, the cutting of branch on the width and the termination early of the tree, make the tree both narrow and shallow. Now, what does this allow us to do? In fact, this is by generated by the leader of the Facebook Go team, Yuan Dongtian. And so as he watches the game, he calculates the likelihood of win. That is the value evaluation of 2. This is Lisidou, and this is Alphago. Okay, so he can actually tell what the computer feels, how likely is it to win as time goes. And so at this point, I think there's almost no hope for human. But then the hope came back. Okay, and then suddenly the human lost all possibilities, and this is around 120 steps. After that, there's no hope. But Lisidou actually didn't know that. Alphago is fully confident, and the win rate is higher and higher. And this played out over and over again. Okay, so in doing this, actually, the DeepMind team did something very innovative. It allowed AlphaGo to play by itself in order to generate more samples. It feels, now the first bunch of sample actually is obtained from actual plays between humans through an online system. I'm going to tell you a little bit. But the team felt that even that sample is not enough. So it allowed the system to play against one another. Okay, so this, if you are familiar with the Chinese fiction of 射雕英雄传, by Jin Yong, this master of Kung Fu, you know, he was captured, but then he can practice his Kung Fu by allowing his left hand to play against right hand. Okay, so it's like that. And then he improved gradually. Okay, so that was in the fiction. But the team, AlphaGo team, wanted to see if this is true in the actual game. If you allow your game to play now, so this is an older version against a newer version, all the way until version 1 million. Okay, and so they generated actually 30 million extra samples from this self-play. Now, we will see the effect of that. So putting it together by combining the human-generated board positions and moves and the self-play generated ones, it generated a probability distribution for each board which looks like this. Okay, the darker, the more favorable for you. It's called a value network. Now, then you can put all this together using the old trick, which is sampling, okay, Monte Carlo method. In Monte Carlo method, you throw a dice, and then you try different ways, and then you count your successes and use that as a guide to go in the direction where the most success is. For AlphaGo, what it did was in each direction, it actually had a method to reach all the way to the bottom, 150 steps later, and then back that value up. Okay, back that value up to give you a sense. So it's like sending a lot of sentries out and then ask them to report back and then count the number of successes in order to guide you. Okay, that's a very intuitive idea. But we, AI researchers, didn't know that this idea, simple idea, worked until 10 years ago, exactly 2006. That's when the first successful application of the Monte Carlo search tree was applied to Go and scored a success. And it's been 10 years, and look at the success. Okay. Right. So they did a study. This is the study of comparing. So for people who write papers a lot, this is familiar. This is method number 1, method number 2, method number 3. This is when you use each method individually, and this is when you combine all 3 methods. Okay, familiar? People who write a lot of papers. Then, of course, this when you use all 3, it gives you the highest performance, which reached, if you can read, the Nandan, which is 9段, okay, which is very, very high. And now, how powerful is the computer, right? We always wonder. In fact, it's not that powerful. It has 1,000 CPUs and 176 GPUs. We can afford that at HKUST. Yeah. So so the computer is actually not a big deal. The data actually came, as I mentioned, let me summarize again. They extracted from 160,000 actual games with humans, 30 million positions. These are real games between people with very high ability, and then from self-play. Okay? And then they just put 0.5 of policy generated here plus 0.5 from here. Very simple. And this is another weakness that I think if Lisa Doe knew about this, he can do better. And they used 3 weeks to train this network. Okay. Now, going back to where they got the data between humans. Actually, there are many online websites where you can go play. And this one is very famous, called KGS. Okay? It has almost all nationalities, thousands and thousands of fans go on to play. And they have this ranking process. Now, this actually allowed the generation of a huge amount of data. And so in computer science term, that's called crowd intelligence. In fact, this crowd intelligence is not a new thing. As in business, I'm sure there are many people from business, you know about this book by Kevin Kelly, known as Out of Control. Okay? Which means if you have a huge number of crowds, the level of intelligence is beyond thinking. It's beyond any individual's control, like the bees. And this is exactly what's happening. Using a lot of people's data, and these people's data have to satisfy some conditions. They are theoretical proofs. Number 1, they have to complement each other. They can't be all the same. Number 2, they have to be above a certain level of performance. And when you have that, you generate something beyond any individual level. And this is what's happening, where the magic happened. Okay, and this is, I believe, in third game. So they say, okay, it's finally the dog is showing itself, Alphago, which the Chinese, the internet users are very talented. All right, so some people ask this question, is it fair? So for example, if we consider Alphago, that dog, to be a real goal, okay, a real dog, and Okay, so if Lisa Doe eats a hamburger a day, how many hamburgers does the dog eat? In fact, 300 times more, okay? so is this a fair play? We don't know, okay? So this is up to discussion. Then, if we increase the number of hamburgers to infinity, will it be much, much better than Lisa Doe? Actually, the DeepMind people actually were asked this question, and they say, we don't know. If we just throw in all the computing power in the world, does it level off, or does it continue to climb? Maybe 100 to 1, okay? So there's no hope for human. We don't know. Okay. Reflection. Now, all of this is happening within the general concept of artificial intelligence development. Now, granted, artificial intelligence wasn't all that easy. Okay, for the last 60 years, it has been up and down, and for the longest time, people thought it was hopeless. So how did it start? It all started with Alan Turing with this simple question, which is, can machines think? Can we prove that machines think? He is a firm believer that machines can think, and he even designed a test known as the Turing test, which allowed a judge to tell a computer apart from a human without seeing their faces, okay, by having a conversation. You must have seen the movie about Turing in the last year, and it was a very moving movie. And there was a piece about Turing test there. Now, subsequently, the brainchildren of Turing, these two are very notable persons. The first one, Herbert Simon. So both of them started in Carnegie Mellon University and built the first department, the school in artificial intelligence. Herbert Simon himself is a Nobel Prize winner in economics, and then he later on switched to AI. So they considered playing chess so they basically asked the question, what activities are still considered intelligent for humans? Let's attack them, okay? No, not let's attack them, let's even surpass them. So they designed a few things known as logic theorists. From the name of the system, you can imagine it can prove theorems, and indeed it can, okay? There's something called general problem solver, but then all of these are based on an assumption. That is, the intelligence comes from a collection of symbols, and manipulation of the symbols, such as in rules, in inferences, in deductions, allows you to generate intelligence. So this is the first line of thinking that controlled artificial intelligence for at least 30 years. Then came a new development which uses a very high-level similarity with how human brain is organized. It's known as neural networks, where neurons are connected, and it's the connection that generates intelligence, that encodes the knowledge. Okay, so the input comes here, the output goes there, and by going through, this information will change the weight, and this is how the intelligence and memory and deduction and inference and learning happens. Okay, so these are two different schools. But in robotics, of course, people have gone on. So there was a famous slogan that intelligence comes from instinct. Your intelligence actually doesn't reside only in your brain, but it can be in your joint, can be in your finger, can be in your feet. It's your whole body is a intelligence. So this idea actually is coming back because some people believe that if you have an artificially intelligent computer, you can live forever because all of your embodiment can be put into that computer. But this school basically says no, okay? Because without your whole body, your brain is nothing. You have to experience the world. That goes into philosophy. So as we mentioned at the very beginning in 1996, then we had this competition between Kasparov and the computer, and people joked that in the end, Kasparov really wished that he could reach to the plug and pull it. Then a few years ago, knowledge became a big buzzword coming from IBM and was championed by this competition between the IBM Watson computer and the TV champions and won. Okay, so I would have to say that both of these IBM computers were actually designed for a specific purpose, and it's extremely hard to adapt them from their predetermined domain to a general domain. And the reason is although there's learning, the learning is not a big part of these two systems, but the situation is changed later. So starting from Siri, we suddenly learn that crowd intelligence is important. This is a Chinese equivalent of Siri. Actually, it's from WeChat. You all know that we have a WeChat artificial intelligence lab right here at HKUST. And one of the things they did was using the mobile phone and WeChat to collect people's voices as they read a passage in a book and collect all of them in order to generate an audible book. And in very short time, they created 100 audible books and served the blind people, the deaf, blind, okay? All right, okay. Now, all of these point to us one thing, that artificial intelligence is advancing. But let's not forget one thing, okay, which is here we are not creating a computer like a human. Instead, we are building tools that in one dimension can outperform human, but in all other dimensions will fail. Okay? So it's like building a telescope. A telescope can allow you to see further, but you will not shut your eye because you get a telescope, right? It will not replace yourself. It just enhances yourself. This is so far all the artificial intelligence have been designed to do. Now, so just to go back to, for those techies, the real technology advance came a few years ago. And it's called Convolutional Neural Net. It allows you to look at a picture and making sense of the features at different levels of granularity, and also allows you to control the features at a local region without losing information as you go through this network. So from the first picture to the eventual hotspots, okay, it goes through a sequence of network filtering and eventually allows you to generate features at different granularity. And its success has been demonstrated not only in computer vision, which is a big part in driverless cars, for example, in Google, but also speech, okay, speech understanding, and also today in natural language understanding, can read a text and making sense of it. Okay. But the new development actually is as exciting and it's progressing. And one term which you probably have not heard of is reinforcement learning. And this is the technology behind many of the game playing, and certainly is a very important thing in Alphago. Okay, so how it works is, unlike computer vision, which takes a one-shot filter, it is a long process along the timeline. And the reward, which tells you whether you made a right or wrong decision, comes much later. Okay, so it's a delayed reward. It's like investment. When you buy a stock, tomorrow you don't know if it's worth it, but maybe a month later you will know. Okay, and then, so the question is, so this mouse is navigating and trying to find this cheese based on different sensors, is making an observation, and this observation is fed back to the algorithm to generate a policy. The policy will tell you the best action to take, which again is looped back to the observation. And this continues, okay, if the policy is learned correctly, it will eventually lead you to your target. And this is how the algorithm works. Now, in fact, the first time many people in the world heard about DeepMind is through their first Nature paper, where they demonstrated the self-learning ability on Atari games. Atari games is a very basic computer game, such as using a computer to shoot some spacecraft. And here I have a video of one of my students who recreated this DeepMind algorithm to play ping pong on the computer. Okay, so yeah, so you can see this ping pong bat is trying to receive the ping pong, and at the same time, right? So you don't want to miss it. At the same time, you want to hit the same point over and over again and escape from this wall. Okay, so that's the game. Now, the beauty of this is it runs the reinforcement learning continuously by itself, without human knowledge, without human data. Okay, so at first it played awful, but gradually, actually it took us 3 days to train this program. You can see it actually plays very well. It learned fully. So in that game, in that paper, they reported about 20 such games in which computers, in many cases, can play better than human. So how do I get out of this? There, okay. All right, now, with all this technology behind, we much more advanced to the next level. For example, can we understand the humor behind this picture? Well, today, let me tell you, computers cannot. Okay, so this becomes a target of research for people from different fields, from computer vision, from natural language understanding, and so another one is the so-called Vinaigrette Schema challenge. In natural language understanding, it says, John comforted Mike because he was so upset. So who was upset? Okay, for us human, we can understand very easily, right? Because we have so much background knowledge. How does a computer understand this? So there are still a bunch of problems related to background knowledge, related to the context, that we cannot solve very well today yet. Now, this, of course, is all future work for computers, but the biggest challenge today is we actually have very little knowledge about consciousness and motivation. We don't know how we are motivated to learn something. We are motivated to be interested in something. We are aware that we exist. Okay, so for example, we look at the outside world. Some organization in our brain allows us to have the image which we can retrieve when we see a similar thing. And we actually want to retrieve that. We actually select something to remember. And we are actually happy when we see something. We are very far from this understanding. And so this lack of understanding actually did not stop computer scientists from continuously to make progress. And this is because neurobiology as one field and computer science and artificial intelligence as another field have been going on in parallel. There's very little crossover. So today, you don't need to know much about biology or neurobiology or neural consciousness in order to study artificial intelligence and vice versa. Some people hope that we start talk to each other and make some crossover, such as the European European brain project and the US brain project, but such things are not making big progress today. Now going back to Alphago. So I gave this overview very briefly on artificial intelligence. Why is Alphago a significant milestone? The reason is, as I mentioned, the first 20 years of AI witnessed the symbolic branch of AI in advancement in search, in Monte Carlo tree search, and the second 20 year allowed significant development in machine learning. And this is almost the first time when the two are combined with a major stunning success. Okay, so it tells us the first lesson is we cannot just pursue one approach by, while ignoring the other. We have to combine both of them. use machine learning as well as symbolic search, brute force search. So this brings the concept of generality into the fore. And this is where DeepMind is trying to go. As a company, it's actually inspired to make a breakthrough in AI, and that AI is known as artificial general intelligence. What's general about it? The idea is the algorithms that uses, for example, value network, policy network, reinforcement learning, and Monte Carlo search tree. This package can be transferred to another domain, and it can work just well. So it has worked well in Go. What about chess? What about in financial investment? What about in education of a student? What about recommendation systems? What about many, many things in health and so on? So it believed, so these people from DeepMind, they believe that it is possible to build a collection of general approaches that can be equally applied in different places. The caveat is you have to get big data in that area. Okay, so this is like this cartoon shows, you have the same chicken, but you can have different input, you get different output. And so another name for this is it's an end-to-end system. The one end, the input end, is the raw data. The output end is pure knowledge and action. Okay, what happens in between is all the same among different domains. Okay, so going back to AlphaGo, we all know that the fourth game, AlphaGo lost, and lost miserably, right? And this happened in step number 79. So 78, Li Sidou placed a stone here, and it's considered the most brilliant in this game, and maybe in his career. It's called the 神来之手. Okay, so why is that? In fact, later on, when journalists went to ask him, and he didn't know, he said, I have no other places to put, so that's the only place I put it down. But in fact, this was evaluated to be a move made by an extremely low-level amateur, according to the value evaluation of AlphaGo. So what does this tell us? This tells us that AlphaGo does not actually have consciousness. It does not know who it's playing with. How can Li Sidou make an extremely amateur move? Okay, now let's take a look at this further. In fact, this effect in machine learning is well known. Okay, we don't know actually what happened. Maybe they had a bug. But from the theory in machine learning, we can see this is a well-known system known as never-ending learning in CMU. So they have this machine which takes a website continuously. It never rests over many years, okay? And every time it takes a website, it analyzes it, digests some little knowledge, combine with its existing knowledge, and augment its knowledge base. Now, the knowledge level increases, as you can see, as we go on, increases, and suddenly there's a drop. And this is, we believe, the same effect as the game 4. And this is known as overfitting. Okay, the system actually was trained on data that is biased towards something that's not reality. Okay, so in fact, what is not reality? Now, when we ask that, we come back to this self-play. Self-play. So this old master is playing left hand with right hand and get higher and higher. But theoretically, is it possible to get higher and higher? Well, maybe this increase is only an illusion. Okay, because the data will bias the whole system to believe that the opponent is a computer. Okay, and so because of this bias, in occasional places, when it hit a certain value evaluation, it will make a wrong move. Okay, instead of thinking the opponent is though, it thinks the opponent is itself. And so this another view of this is if your data is biased, a probabilistic conclusion is everything in this picture is a naipo, but this is in fact not. Okay, now that is Go. What about mahjong? What about poker? In fact, the difference between the two types of games is one is perfect information. Everything is in front of you. Okay, all the opponent's moves, all the opponent available boards. But in poker and mahjong, it's imperfect. You have to guess what's in, or is the person bluffing, and so on. So in fact, it is again the University of Alberta team that is leading in the world in computer poker. So last time, it was between them and CMU. Last time CMU was the world computer champion, but they could only make almost a tie with the human champion. So it still hasn't reached the level of Go yet. Okay, and this may very well be because the game is much harder. So people who are inspired to generate a computer game playing still have a chance to take the world. Now we reached the last part, which is we have covered AlphaGo. We have covered artificial intelligence. What does all this mean to us? Okay, what are the implications of artificial intelligence and AlphaGo? So these are some of the news items I just extracted today. So some people ask aloud, can AlphaGo play well also in the financial market? This is where some people believe the next big battle will be. And more beneficial is online education. What can AlphaGo bring to online education? There are many people thinking aloud. What does this mean? Okay. Now, in fact, here I should be very happy to tell you that we are not behind. So we just opened a HKUST WeChat joint AI lab last November, and this lab is live and very much active. Okay, so we have more than 10 professors and students working on various aspects. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work there as well. Okay, so this is some of the work. So for example, we have people working on this is making sense of a picture and video and translating the story behind into understandable words. We have Professor C.K. Tang, we have Professor D.Y. Yang. We have people like Brian Font working on speech recognition. We have Professor Pascal Fang working on emotional robots. This is her Zara the Supergirl. And I myself am working on transfer learning, which hopefully will fix the AlphaGo game number 4, which allow you to identify this distribution bias and allow you to transfer knowledge from one domain to another in a continuous way. Okay, now in fact, closer to AlphaGo, we have a team led by PhD student Zhongqi Lü, who actually in parallel to the DeepMind people implemented a system which can take over 10 years of financial market data and train using reinforcement learning to train a market predictor. And so far, let me tell you, he's been doing well. And he invited me to dinners quite often. And he pays for it, yeah. Okay, so what can we learn from all this? In fact, there are several things. One is the market potential can be learned by taking a bird's eye using the neural network. The whole market trend can be recognized much more earlier than human. Second, it allows a delayed reward to be propagated through a network using reinforcement learning. And thirdly, the big data is more and more available. So I would like to get some of these necessary conditions and see if they apply to different domains. And this is also important, an important part. In fact, we are using the same machinery to create a conversational agent. And that agent is going to be much more advanced than Siri. Okay, so now if you read some headlines, you probably are concerned about this. Okay, the cartoon tells you, will the computer tell us to go away? Now, can Alphago become a professor and therefore the university can save a lot of salary? Can AlphaGo become a driver so all the cars become driverless? Maybe it's true. And so on and so forth. Okay, are doctors going to be replaced? And you know, it goes on. What do you think? Yes, okay. Well, let's think about it for a while. I like to argue, you know, from both sides, and so we save this question for later. Now, but here I want to tell you one thing, okay, which is when you look at AlphaGo, the first time it showed itself in the world was this game last November between itself and the European champion Fan Hui. Fan Hui was not that strong, okay? So the Chinese top player is Ke Jie. He always says Fan Hui plays 臭棋, 臭棋. Means a very bad move. Now, so this, so why did AlphaGo suddenly in 4 months' time reach the world level? Okay, Li Sidou. In fact, the secret lies in the objective function. AlphaGo is only a little better. Okay, it's trained only a little better than the opponent. If the opponent is Fan Hui, in fact, what it demonstrated is a little bit above the level of Fan Hui. And so many top masters of the Weiqi world, of the Go world, was surprised when they compared the two. They say, oh, how come it can learn so quickly? In fact, it's not so quickly. It's the way it is trained, okay? Because the objective function is to win. If you win one stone, it's a win. But in fact, for humans, it's to maximize the win. You want to capture the maximum territory. And so they are really different objectives. Now, so I want to use this slide to tell you that computers will not completely replace human, at least for one kind, which is those who can set the objective function. If you are able to be to take a real-world problem and formulate it into a mathematical form for the objective function, you are going to be a master of the future AI system. Okay, so think about that. Now, will computer harm the human? Now, the same thing, argument before. Will the computer still be controlled by us? Okay, through what? Now, of course, the objective function setting is one, but don't forget the data. The data, after all, are all provided by us. Without the KGS system, there won't be any AlphaGo today. Okay? Without us speaking to you mobile phone, there won't be Siri today. So one way for us to beat computer today is to simply shut up, not providing the data or providing the wrong data. And so, okay, now going back to this summary, I'm very close to the ending. What we learned from AlphaGo, where AI can play a major role, is the availability of high-quality data. And we must use integrated AI algorithms. And so that means we need engineering talents, people who know both the symbolic side and the machine learning side. And we need powerful computing. We need computing power. Okay. Maybe there are others, but these are certainly necessary conditions. And where the future focus will be. So I raise one issue, which is human and machine must learn to exist. Okay, we cannot, today it's impossible to say, forget AlphaGo. We turn a blind eye. We put our head in the sand. No. So on the right-hand side here, I show a picture of Google car. In fact, Google car had a crash recently because it thought the bus behind it was not going to accelerate, but the driver actually accelerated, trying to pass Google car, and so the two actually crashed. So what does that mean? That means no matter how safe a driverless car is, there's one assumption. It's only safe if all the cars are driverless. Okay? That's right. Yeah. No. So we have to learn to coexist. And we have to design systems that learn to coexist with human, to anticipate human error. And this is another tip for future research. Okay. Now, so humans can become not only data provider, but also objective setter. And machines will be there to learn and serve. So finally, my final word is either we educate ourselves to be the best, or you can become a programmer. Thank you very much.
I'll start an argument with you about that, because the driverless car is something I was paying a little attention to, and the accident rate in driverless cars is an order of magnitude less than the accident rate for humans. So I've been arguing that we should first legalize driverless cars and then eventually illegalize humans driving, because of the advances we're going to make with AI and research in biology, we're going to live a lot longer, and we're going to go from accidents being the fourth largest cause of death to being the largest cause of death of humans. And so this is a simple lead into you say we have to learn to be compatible with them. The fact is, think about driverless cars. If everyone's driverless, cars will communicate with each other in a very rapidly and automatic way. The accident rate will go way down, and so we become passengers. But it's an example of automation. The job, taxi drivers are, some of you, I had a recently interesting taxi ride from the airport. I would have much rather had a driverless car doing it. So can you argue back about why we're going to keep our jobs, or whether you shouldn't become an automation engineer, because that's the last job?
Okay, I guess that's very philosophical, and I'm not prepared to answer that. I'm sure the argument can go on and on. Very interesting question. But I just heard a very interesting idea, which compares today's driverless cars to horse-drawn cars in 1900s. When trains and cars, automobiles first appeared, there were many accidents. And then they disappeared. The accidents disappeared. Maybe we can learn something there. By the way, Huami is a very good Go player. So
okay, no. Yeah, so I heard the next move with Alphago is just erase all human data. So all this, 30 million, human play, then they start learn from scratch, basically just a human. First face empty, is this board, right? So if they start from learn by themselves, so how you predict whether they get the same level of this is,
right.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, if you read the fine print of their Nature paper, at the end of the article, they say that one thing they don't know how to do is transfer learning. But we do. Yeah. So unless they solve this problem of how to transfer knowledge from the initial solution given by the massive human moves to automated solution, how to reconcile the two types of data, they will continue to face this problem. So I believe the real, so yes, that's the way to go. But there's always a room to play for the human-generated data. You cannot do without supervised data. That's my belief. Maybe I'm very glad. Actually, they claim not very much. Now, the last version, so in fact, it improved compared to the first one by 80%. Okay, but one combined with the data and tested on real humans, they found the reinforcement learning, the automatically generated, will be not a big deal so far. But obviously, if you want a general system, that part has to play a major role.
Hi, Qiang. Very, very nice talk. I really enjoyed it, and I have learned a lot of things. So my question is that, do you believe there is an upper bound, a firm upper bound in terms of the intelligence? So which means that you cannot make the computer infinitely smarter at some point. Because of the data limitations, we cannot have a stronger Go players. Then you somehow stopped.
Okay, so that's a very good question. Actually, in machine learning, there are a lot of theory about this. So a short answer is there is always a bound, and the bound is a function of the algorithm and the data, right? So so on the data side, depending on how diverse the data is and how extensive the data is and the quality of the data, you can raise, so this is known as ensemble learning. You can raise the overall performance by a certain %, but it's not indefinite. Okay, so that's on the data side. On the algorithm side, back to this, the tool playing self-play, there's a very well-known theory known as co-training. So you have two systems that are teaching each other and correcting each other's mistakes. There's a theoretical limit there.
Yang Qiang, I'll ask you something about transfer learning. You say Alphago, when they want to benefit, they want to transfer to do the other things. The function-wise, you think they are sufficient enough and translate success to others, or maybe some function basically they don't have. According to your presentation, just different input, get a different output. Nothing to do with the transfer function itself.
Oh no, when you take the chicken to another food, when you take the machinery to another domain, in fact, you want to keep most part of that machinery intact. Okay, so the training that happens in the new domain, you want that training to be as efficient as possible.
The question is whether their basic function is sufficient to learn the new domain, so they can successfully play the Go. But same algorithm,
right?
Reinforced learning, decision tree, other things are basically organized. Is sufficient to other area or at the limits.
I understand your question. So it all depends on how far the objective functions are to each other. If it's too far, then it's impossible to train, to transfer. There's no guarantee. So it's a function of the distance. It's a functional distance between two spaces.
Hi, Qiang. Thanks for your talk. I'm wondering, does the policy in reinforcement learning in Alphago or other games has a explicit form like follow some distribution, or just learned end-to-end via a convolutional neural net?
Typically, it doesn't have a explicit functional form. Yeah, it's implicit. It's implicit in the. So at first, the first generation had a state transition function between the current situation and the next situation if you take an action. So it's a function transferring from the states to another state. But that is implicit in the state space. Nowadays, people tend to use the neural network and use a hidden state space. And that hidden state space is even further from our intuition, and it's even harder to get a explicit functional form.
So one of the really shocking thing about the Alphago's playing Go to me was that he actually it made a really strange move at the beginning. So a lot of experts even Go said, "Oh, this is really bad move." But later on, end of the game, it turns out that move was really good move
Right.
for the Alphago. That's a really scary thing to me. And then my question is that where this move is coming from? Is it coming from humans, the matches, or it's a reinforcement learning? That's a number one question. And number two question is that if this AlphaGo system was used in elsewhere, like health or educational, maybe the AI will tell us that some move or some decision that we don't may understand. But at that time, should we follow these AIs?
Right.
Or should we believe our intuition?
Right. Okay. So yeah,
Yes.
both questions are good. Yeah. In fact, I was in this Phoenix TV, and I was talking to one of the Jiuduan masters. His teacher is the world most famous Go player, Wu Qingquan, and was ever. Yeah. And he told me a story. I mean, offline, not on TV. He said his mentor invented a new. So they call them 定式, which means patterns. Yeah. So for starting, children learning Go, they have to memorize a lot of patterns, just like us memorizing grammar. Then he found that his mentor actually started to change the pattern and started to invent some strange patterns at age 81. Okay, which means the mentor has seen enough games and made some in computer terms we said a very advanced policy. Okay, and so it's still a pattern, but it's a pattern that's not seen before. So I think that's the case with your observation and many other people, because our head is limited, it's not very big. Now, if the computer tells you to do something, should you follow its advice? I guess it depends. Yeah, we'll discuss offline, okay? All right.
Suppose that you change the rule of the game a little bit. I think Go is 19 by 19, right? Suppose you change the game to 21 by 21. Would AlphaGo still be able to play?
No. It's because, again, that fine print. They told us that they do not know how to do transfer learning from one board size to another size. The policy is totally different. So if you don't have much, so you go for an extreme case of 21 by 21, there's not much data there. It will just fail miserably. That's my prediction. We don't know. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So that means there's still a lot of research to do.
Thank you, Professor. My question is, because you say the input is mostly from the players from level 6 to level 9, right? So can we assume that the player who is in level 5 or even lower, he or she has higher possibility to win AlphaGo because the input domain of the AlphaGo is limited, right?
No, no. The argument doesn't go that way. Yeah. So if somebody makes a stupid move only once, AlphaGo will probably be thrown into a wrong estimation. But if you continuously to make that stupid move, you'll be dead. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm still trying to understand and what's the contribution of AlphaGo. And so you said it's the so-called deep learning, and
Monte Carlo search.
This right, the Monte Carlo search tree,
yeah,
and this reinforcement learning.
That's right.
Right, but none of it is really the invention of AlphaGo, right? So people have deep learning.
It's been more than 10 years. Yeah.
Right, and so do you think the contribution just combine them together, or like in terms of deep learning, are there anything new?
I think the realization is that first of all, we know all the algorithms before, yes, but how to combine them, this is the novel part. This is really interesting because it takes a lot of experience to learn. So, and also the availability of the data itself, although not an innovation, but before we did this trial, we did not know that the data can make that much difference. So there are a few reflections, not in technical sense, but the understanding that we actually have enough machinery. The only thing missing is the data and the fine-tuning of the whole integrated machinery. That experience, that lesson, I think is very significant. Yeah, you may disagree from a technical perspective.
Right. So if that's the case, and if you want to do transfer learning, and so it's not just simply you move all the the algorithm to a new domain.
Right.
So in a new domain, maybe you don't have Monte Carlo search tree, and you may need a different type of.
Very likely, but I think what they mean by artificial general intelligence here is they want to conquer all the game domains using Monte Carlo. So a class of domains. When you go from this class of game domains to a very different domain, say health, maybe Monte Carlo tree search will not work. Maybe it's something else that you have to search. But in a confined area, it is general. In the global picture, you may have to search for.
Right. So I mean, I know. So one observation I seem to got is that maybe AlphaGo is not that general, and but if you look back at IBM Watson, and it's pretty general, and in a sense that now actually Watson is opening up the API, so anyone who wants to make use of Watson can actually use the API. I think they have the annual competition. And I think in about 3 years, they are going to give out a couple $million to one application which will make use of Watson the best.
Okay. I think I can agree with you partially. The part that I might disagree is that Watson is more significant.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's more significant, but in a sense, actually, I think it's much better than Deep Blue. So Deep Blue is just the one shot.
Okay, that's trash.
No, it's done it. And, people got encouraged.
People at
but
first
Watson
thought,
actually now people still use it.
Right. Actually, Deep Blue allows us to realize one thing, which is a bunch of maybe 200 second-class world champion can beat the top world champion. So this crowd intelligence is the first lesson we learned. The second is if your algorithm doesn't work, you can throw in a lot of machines and it will eventually work. The high-performance computer is what they try to sell with the advertisement of Deep Blue. You can think these lessons are easy lessons, but before we knew it, we actually we were not sure.
What's the next, what's the next grand challenge? So do you think it's possible, for example, to come up with, a program which can sit at SAT, for example, and do better than, the...
In US, there's a Allen Institute of Artificial Intelligence, and this is by one of the founders of Microsoft who set up this institute to tackle artificial intelligence. And one of their goals is to pass the SAT test by a robot. Japan has a similar program, and China just launched another one with Xunfei, which is the Chinese version of Siri. Almost all the Huawei mobile phone has Xunfei. And they want to create a robot that in some future time will pass the national exam and be admitted to Tsinghua University.
Previously, you mentioned that we shouldn't really worry about jobs because we can do things that AI cannot yet do. However, there are a lot of tasks that are, like, you would call them like low-skill tasks, and those can be automated. What would you do, or what can we as a society do when that, or like if that occurs?
Okay, That's a very good question. Let's take one example just to be concrete. Let's say a journalist. In fact, if you look at what they do, they write articles, they write about events, but many of these things, I don't know how much percent, but some people claim 80% of these things can be done by AI. So the other 20% have to be people who got A in their journalist classes. And so if you get a B and C and D, maybe you should change to do something else.
But what about things that like uneducated individuals would have to do in order to make a living? For example, like package sorting or like working at McDonald's or something. Like,
no, I think I gave the advice of learning programming.
Okay, so coding, that's the word.
Yes.
Well, let's thank Professor Yang Qiang again for a beautiful talk.